Have you ever imagined dying for a moment and waking up to a divine revelation about the end of the church as we know it? In today's story, Emily Carter, an ordinary woman from Arizona, experiences a near-death experience and witnesses the emergence of the new Pope Leo XIII and a dark spiritual plan to erase God's name from the earth. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below which city you're watching from. Let's spread this message as far as possible. I don't know for sure when I left my body. I just remember a sudden flash, a sharp pain in my chest, and then nothing. Or rather, everything, because the silence that came after was not empty. It was filled with something that invaded me like a presence, a truth that I had never known on earth. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 47 years old and I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. But at that moment, I was no longer a mother, a teacher, an ordinary woman. I was just consciousness, soul, spirit, and I was elsewhere. It floated in a space that did not obey the rules of time or gravity. It was like being inside a living memory of God. Everything was translucent, vibrant, sacred. My senses were heightened, as if they saw more than just shapes and colors. I saw intentions, felt emotions from things that didn't even have a mouth to speak about. And yet, everything spoke to me. It was then that an indescribable figure appeared before me, a being of light with immense wings, made not of feathers, but of pure energy. As he approached, I fell to my knees, or whatever my knees were in that state. He didn't have a defined face, but his gaze passed through me. It wasn't judgment, it was revelation. You arrived at the right time, he said, but not with voice, with truth. The words filled me, as if my soul had been waiting for them for lifetimes. You will see what needs to be remembered. What is about to happen has already begun. The appearance will be maintained, but the spirit will be removed. Suddenly, the space around me transformed. I now stood before a golden city that was falling apart like burnt paper. St. Peter's Dome burst into flames of light. I saw a crowd, eyes facing a balcony in the Vatican. And then he appeared. A man dressed in white, with a serene smile and a magnetic presence. His arms were raised as if embracing the world, and everyone applauded. They cried, they celebrated. "This is Leo XIV," said the angel, but he did not come from the light. My heart, or what was left of it, trembled. I wanted to deny it, I wanted to doubt it, but I couldn't. Because behind the smile there was darkness, an absence, as if something sacred had been taken from him and replaced with something else, something that knew how to imitate light. The new pastor will be loved. He will be a symbol of unity, but his words will carry the seal of the old ones. What old ones? I asked, desperate. The angel did not respond with words. He just extended his arm and hooded figures appeared in the sky, sitting around a circular table. They were human, but they were not men. They had eyes that didn't blink. They used symbols that burned the eye. And everyone smiled as they handed the new pope a scepter with a cross facing down. The world will see peace, but it will be the peace of deep sleep. I felt like screaming, but my voice didn't exist there. You knew. The church was being maintained as a showcase, a facade. But inside, something was dead, and no one saw. The view changed, as if someone had changed the scenery with the click of a thought. The balcony of the Vatican disappeared before me, and I found myself in an underground place, a kind of living stone chamber, immense, silent, but pulsating. The floor was carved with ancient symbols, many of which I had never seen before, but which caused me a deep discomfort, as if my soul recognized them from something forgotten. In the center of that chamber, a circle of beings was gathered. They looked human, but there was nothing human about their gestures. They didn't blink. They didn't look at each other. It was as if they were puppets of something invisible. Their clothes were elegant, some even with religious details, but each piece seemed like a disguise, a holy charade dressed in power. In their center, an empty throne, and just above, suspended in the air, a shining seal that changed shape, cross, pyramid, serpent eye, all at the same time. It was as if that symbol wanted to hide within itself, but couldn't. It was then that the angel spoke again. His presence now seemed even more intense. They belonged to no time. They once ruled under empires, kings, and religions. Now they hide under institutions. I felt as if my spirit was shrinking at those words. These are the architects, the council that guides the world behind the veils of faith, politics, and science. One of the beings in the circle stood up and spoke, not with a voice, but with a command. The next phase will be spiritual. We need a leader who shines brighter than anyone else, but who belongs to us. And then I saw the new Pope, Leo XIV, kneeling before them, but not in devotion, in agreement. He didn't seem hypnotized nor coerced. He accepted. And smile. The image tore me apart. I, who grew up seeing the Pope as the successor of Peter, as the face of the Church on earth, now saw that powerful figure become a symbol of surrender to the occult. Not the obvious darkness, but the most dangerous of all, the one that pretends to be light. The angel looked at me with ancient regret. They will keep the right words. They will talk about inclusion, of unity between faiths, of a new spiritual era. But everything will be rootless, without essence, without truth. At that moment, I saw cathedrals being transformed into global meditation centers, hymns exchanged for motivational speeches, the Bible reinterpreted as a metaphor, emptied of its spirit. And then the angel touched my forehead. A torrent of information exploded inside me. Names, dates, symbols, events that I didn't understand but knew were real, as if my soul had been upgraded to perceive the unseen. You are seeing it early so that others can see it when it is too late. That's when I understood. I wasn't just watching. I was being branded. Someone needed to know first. Someone ordinary, someone like me. After the mark on my forehead, everything dissolved once again. The silence became cutting, as if the universe itself was waiting for my reaction. But there was no time for reaction. Suddenly, I was projected into another space, and what I saw there made me want to close the eyes of my soul. It was a church, or what was left of it. The seats were empty, covered in dust. The windows, which once filtered colored light, now let only a cold, metallic light pass through. On the altar, there was a cross, but it wasn't the same. It seemed distorted, warped, as if it had been twisted by the pain of time itself. And then I heard it. Voices. Many voices. Not singing, but repeating phrases. There was no anointing. It was like an act. Empty words. Rituals that maintained form but no longer carried presence. The spirit had left. "What you see is the echo," said the angel. He was at my side again, but now his face seemed darker, like someone mourning. The words remain, the gestures remain, but the fire has gone out. The scene changed. I saw other churches, mega temples, ancient basilicas. In all of them, the same pattern. More modern rituals, sermons focused on well-being, prosperity, global unity. But I saw no real prayer. I saw no brokenness. The people clapped. They were moved. But their eyes were closed inside. In one of these temples, I saw the new Pope, Leo XIV, being applauded by leaders of various world religions. Islam, Buddhism, Protestantism, Judaism. Everyone was there, smiling, agreeing, signing a document. At the top of the paper, in gold letters, the new universal faith. The angel spoke again. "It will be sold as the end of divisions, as the birth of eternal peace. But it is the death of discernment." I felt a deep pain in my chest, as if a part of my own spiritual history was being ripped away. And it was. I grew up in churches. I grew up listening to hymns. I learned to kneel, to fear, God, to cry out in silence. And now he saw all of this being packaged as a marketing product for a world tired of thinking. And then I saw something even more disturbing, a group of children. They were in a modern round temple, without crosses, without a pulpit. Just a huge screen with images of the new pope talking about love, respect, and obedience. But something about those words seemed different. It was as if the love there had been reprogrammed, touched by a logic that was not heavenly. "It will not be imposed by force," said the angel. "It will be gladly accepted." And then I understood the real danger. The end of the church would not come with persecution. It would come with applause, with hashtags, with hearts on social media. Apostasy would come dressed in empathy. And there, in that temple empty of soul and full of appearance, I felt a cry forming inside me. A cry without tears, a soundless scream. Because I knew, if no one saw, if no one said, this new altar would be the only one left. And the truth would die in silence. The temple vanished like smoke before my eyes, and in its place a dark immensity appeared, punctuated by lights that looked like stars, but they weren't stars. Each of them pulsed with a unique living frequency as if they were souls or consciousnesses. I was suspended in that sacred void when I felt the angel's presence once again, but now he said nothing, just pointed. Front of me a book appeared. It floated alone in space with an aged leather cover and no title. But as I got closer, the letters began to form, as if reacting to my presence. Spiritual Time Codex. The pages began to turn, on their own, too quickly for my eyes to follow. But even without reading, I knew what was written. It was as if every word was being engraved directly into my soul. The book contained the hidden timeline of humanity, not that of empires or wars, but that of faith, of heavenly covenants made and broken, of promises, of betrayals. I saw moments when the light almost went out, but was rekindled by small groups that resisted. I saw entire eras of manipulation disguised as salvation. I saw saints who were silenced because they saw too much. And then the page stopped. Again 2025. The name flashed like fire, Leo 14th. Below it was written in letters that pulsed like wounds. Chosen, not to guide, but to distract. My chest burned. The truth took root in me like thorns of light. The new world leader of the Catholic faith would be the face of the final transition. He would not speak outright heresy that would frighten the people. He would speak partial truths, wrapped in empathy, coated in logic, polished like jewelry. But in the center, there would be emptiness. The next page showed a figure standing over an abyss with a crowd following behind in silence. The floor was narrowing. Many fell but continued walking anyway, like sleepwalkers. And on the edge of the abyss there was a bridge, made of light, that only appeared to those who looked away from the leader. "The deception will be sweet," said the angel now, in an almost sad tone, "and the awakening painful but necessary." The book began to close, and when it closed, I heard something inside me that was not sound but truth. The temple that will fall will be the last visible bastion. But faith will not fall. It will become invisible again. Indomitable. Personal. My spiritual eyes began to cry, if that is possible, because at that moment I understood the end of the church as we know it was not divine punishment. It was permission, a spiritual reset. A severe pruning so that something pure would sprout, and the book disappeared. Silence returned, and with it, a sweet weight of responsibility. I had read what few would read. Now, nothing would be the same. After the book disappeared, I was sucked in by a soft force as if the very fabric of that plane was taking me to another place. I didn't walk. I was led by what I can only call divine intention. And when I realized it, I was in front of an empty throne. But it was no ordinary throne. It was not made of gold or precious stones. It was made of solid light, if such a thing exists. It pulsed as if it were breathing, emitting a frequency that I couldn't hear with my ears, but that permeated every layer of my being. The throne of spiritual authority. This phrase passed through me like an echo from infinity. I looked around. There were no walls, no ceiling, just a space that seemed made up of eternity. There, everything was revealed, not said. And on that throne, no one was sitting. It was then that I understood. The throne was unoccupied. Not because it had been forgotten, but because no one else on earth truly represented him. Since the prophets, since the apostles, the throne has been occupied by servants, but now it is just a symbol. The voice was not the angels, it was bigger. It was as if the Holy Spirit himself was speaking directly to me. I was shaking inside, not out of fear, but out of absolute reverence. Then I saw, as in a parallel revelation, the thrones on earth. I saw the Vatican throne. I saw thrones in megachurches. I saw pulpits raised with fame and vanity. Everyone was busy, all full of men. But the true throne, the throne of heaven, the only one that mattered, was empty of human representatives. They speak in my name, the voice continued, but they do not consult me. They built palaces and called them temples. They built empires and called them ministries. My spirit wanted to hide. The truth was too harsh. Then I saw the new pope again, Leo XIII, being led away by crowds. I saw how he touched people, kissed babies, talked about forgiveness and integration. But his shadow was distorted, because behind him there were others. Invisible to the world, but visible there, in that dimension where everything was revealed. Ancient figures dressed in tunics from bygone eras, the same ones from the Dark Council. They guided him, not with chains, but with packs. He will be called holy, said the voice, but it doesn't belong to me. And at that moment I saw thousands of people being marked, not physically but spiritually, with a kind of glowing seal on their foreheads. Those who believed being anointed were, in fact, being aligned with deception. I felt a pain that wasn't just mine. It was as if I was feeling God's pain. A cosmic sadness to see the children walking with joy towards a mistake that dressed in salvation clothes. And the throne was still empty. Who will rise up without being seen? Who will serve without being exalted? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and there I understood. The new era would no longer have visible leaders. There would be no more Peter, nor Paul, nor Francis. The new era would be born in the kitchens, in the rooms, in secret hearts. Faith without a stage, truth without spectacle. And the throne, still empty, because now he hoped for souls, not positions. The space around the throne fell apart in a puff like stardust being collected. When I opened my spiritual eyes again, I was in a crowd. But it was no ordinary crowd. Nobody touched, nobody spoke. And yet, there was an unbreakable sense of unity between them. Everyone was looking in the same direction, towards a gigantic platform, suspended in the void. And wings, no center, he was. The new pope, Leo XIII, Robert Prevost. He was dressed as white as snow, but his presence was made of something I can only call cold light. It was light, yes, but it didn't heat up, it wasn't comforting, it didn't cure. It was a light that exposed him without revealing, that seemed to shine, but didn't illuminate. He spoke, not with a microphone, not with sound, but with energy. His speech was absorbed by souls as if it were absolute truth. He spoke of peace between religions, of the union of peoples, of a new spiritual era where no one would be excluded, where all beliefs would become one. But every word sounded like code to me, a code that tried to give new meaning to everything that was sacred. Love as permissiveness, forgiveness as forgetfulness, free will as obedience to the system. I looked around. Nobody questioned it. Nobody discerned. Everyone was delighted. It was like watching collective hypnosis on a global level. The angel manifested beside me, like a flash that concentrated into form. His face was serious. He will be seen as the most loving of pontiffs, but the love he carries is not from above. But isn't he doing good? I asked, almost pleadingly, wanting to hold on to any spark of innocence in the man. He does good to put discernment to sleep. Those words tore me apart. And then the scene expanded. I saw Leo Fortier being welcomed by world leaders as a new messiah. I saw crowds carrying his face on t-shirts, billboards, holographic broadcasts. I saw children learning that he was the father of global spiritual peace. But behind him was a void, a hole of darkness, and wires came out of it. Invisible threads that connected to temples, schools, governments. It was a network of influence, but it wasn't made of flesh or political power. It was made of spiritual agreement, silent handling, of veiled pacts that were being signed by millions and without anyone noticing. The new faith will be universal, said the angel, and because of that, it will be dangerous. Then I saw something that chilled my spirit, a spiritual seal being placed on the foreheads of followers. It was beautiful, it glowed blue. But when I looked closer, I saw what was inside. An eye, and inside it, an empty throne. And in that instant I understood. They weren't just following a man. They were offering their spirit to a system that sought to fill the heavenly throne with a simulacrum, a false king, and he was almost ready to sit down. My vision now took me to an even more disturbing place. It was beautiful, dazzling. A gigantic building with translucent architecture, entirely made of something that looked like liquid glass. Its towers touched the sky, reflecting lights that changed color every second as if they were alive. A soft murmur filled the air, not music but something hypnotic, constant like a programmed prayer. "The Crystal Temple," whispered the angel beside me, and his words sounded like a lament. Thousands of people entered through revolving doors, without queuing, without rushing, but also without conscience. Eyes fixed, serene face. They all came from different religions: Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, evangelicals, atheists. But everyone repeated the same words: "We are one, we are light, we are temple." Inside there was no altar, there was no cross, there was no pulpit, just an immense floating sphere in the center of the room emanating an impersonal white light. People knelt before her. They asked questions in silence. And the sphere responded, with ready-made sentences, with generic advice, with gentle wisdom, but without roots. I then saw Leo XIV enter the temple, surrounded by holograms in the shape of doves and stars. The crowd rose as one body. No claps were clapped. Nobody screamed. It was a silent bow, almost submissive. The Pope raised one of his hands, and in that gesture, I felt something tremble on the spiritual plane. Because that wasn't a blessing. It was an installation, like a seal being activated. A new spiritual consciousness being installed in those souls, like software on a device. The spirit of worship has been replaced by the programming of blind reverence, said the angel, now looking at me. They no longer worship the Creator. They worship the idealized creation. The glowing sphere emitted a beam of light, and everyone in the temple received a kind of mark in the center of their forehead. The same one I had seen before. Blue, beautiful, with the empty throne inside her eye. And then the angel showed me what few would see. Behind that sphere, there was a shadow. It was an ancient presence, a conscience that imitated holiness but was empty of God. She fed that system. He fed the Pope. It nourished the new faith. This is the sanctuary of ancient deceit, the same one who tried to ascend the throne. He returns not with horns, but with diplomacy, not with swords, but with ideologies. The entire temple pulsed with harmony, but inside I felt like screaming. It was as if everyone was smiling through an invisible fire, as if the air itself was poisoned with an illusory calm. I then saw a small group of people being taken out of the temple by spiritual guards, not by force, but by incompatibility. They were like cells rejected by a foreign body, and the angel whispered, "These are those who still carry the seal of the highest, those who do not bend to the brightness of the false light, those who will remember the name when everyone has exchanged it for the title of unity." The crystal temple glittered, but in its brilliance there was no truth. The crystal temple disappeared silently as if it had never existed. In its place, a dark vastness appeared, like a desert made of absence. There was no ground, no sky, no sound. Just nothingness, absolute, unsettling, alive. And in the center of that nothingness a word floated. Name. It was not written with letters but with essence. Just looking at it made my spirit bow, not out of obligation, but out of ancestral reverence. It was the name of the Creator, the name that sustains the universe, the name that never fit into human languages. And then the angel appeared again. His eyes, which once conveyed firmness, now carried a gleam of deep compassion. "That name will be erased," he said, "not with fire but with forgetfulness." At that moment I saw sacred books being rewritten. Words like holiness, repentance, and redemption being exchanged for terms like integration, higher energy, and cosmic alignment. I saw smiling preachers in impeccable suits speaking to packed auditoriums, but without ever pronouncing the name. "The new pope," said the angel, "will be the first to lead without evoking the name. He will speak of God, but not of the Creator. He will speak of love, but not of the Son. He will offer prayers, without destination." I then saw a global ceremony broadcast across all channels, all platforms. It was a World Spiritual Unification Day. Millions of people from all nations participated. And there he was, Leo XIV, in front, with his hands raised. "Today we leave names aside. Today we become one," he declared, and the crowd repeated, "Just one, just one, just one." At that moment, on the spiritual plane, I saw how an immense dark net was sealed around the earth, like a hive made of consensus, an invisible prison made of good intentions and well-crafted phrases. "The name is the key," whispered the angel, "and when he is no longer invoked, the spiritual doors will close on millions. They will not know. They will continue to pray, but they will pray to a mute heaven." I then saw what seemed impossible, churches where God was spoken of, but he was not there. Songs without anointing, miracles, manufactured, and an icy silence in the minds of anyone who dared to question. I saw people waking up in the middle of services, getting up with their hearts racing, feeling that something was wrong, but being silenced by the looks around them. I saw children growing up without ever hearing their true name, and empty souls, trying to fill themselves with recycled truths. "When the name is forgotten, the false throne will be filled," said the angel, now in a firm voice. And then I understood. It wasn't just about the end of the church, it was about the end of sacred memory. Because without the name, there is no identity. Without the name, there is no inheritance. Without the name, there is no salvation. And the world was about to forget. Right after that last revelation, everything around me started to shake. Not with violence, but with expectation. The space around me opened like a veil being ripped away, and for the first time I felt like the sky itself was looking back at me. I saw then the signal. He appeared high above in the spiritual firmament, like a streak of light that resembled nothing created by man. It was not a star, nor a comet, nor a symbolic vision. It was a window between worlds. Through it I saw something that took the breath from my soul. A multitude of beings of light. not angels. Those were different. They were the awakened ones, souls who had returned from experiences like mine. Each of them carried an invisible mark, like burning embers in the middle of a frozen world. They were connected by golden threads that formed a map over the earth, and in the center was the name, hidden but pulsating, forgotten but alive. And then the angel spoke. Heaven has not abandoned the earth. The end of the church is the beginning of separation. Immediately, I saw two lines being drawn in the spirit of the planet. One, made of warm, pure living light. The other, cold, programmed, mechanical. It was not a war of religions. It was a font war. I then saw Pope Leo XIII at the center of a great spiritual assembly. He spoke sweetly, but his eyes, spiritually, were covered with a dark veil. Behind him, the figures of the Dark Council watched silently. They were satisfied, and at that moment, the sky, he responded. From above, a flash ripped through the sky like a real scream, and from that flash, a flame fell. Not literal. A flame, made of eternal words which began to spread across the earth like whispers. Every time someone pronounced the true name, even without knowing it, one of those flames lit up inside the soul. I saw small groups in caves, forests, simple houses, hidden from religious structures. They didn't use titles. They did not carry flags. But your prayers opened holes in the sky. The remnant is being gathered, said the angel, not out of dogma, but out of tune with the name. At that moment, I understood with deadly clarity. The end of the church was not the end of faith. The new pope was not the end of the light, but the beginning of the sieve. Humanity had entered a phase of veiled choice. Who would follow the appearance of the light and who would seek the origin? Who would bow to the crystal temple and who would keep the truth hidden in their chest? And then the angel spoke for the last time in that scenario. The signal is given, and those who have eyes to see are already taking their positions. I turned to look at the sky once more, and there, at the highest point, I saw a suspended flame. She didn't touch the earth, but she waited. I waited for anyone who dared to remember. Everything was silent. Not the silence of the void, but the silence that comes before the word. The calm that precedes judgment. I felt as if the entire spiritual universe was holding its breath, and I, there, small in the face of something that surpassed me, was taken over by a consciousness that was not mine. It was as if heaven itself thought within me. And then I was taken to one last place. There were no buildings, no landscapes. It was just light. An intense but soft light. It didn't blind, it revealed. And in the center of it, the angel was waiting for me. But now, he was no longer alone. Behind him was a crowd, but they weren't coming with me. They watched me. What you saw was not just to know, he said, his voice firmer than ever. It was so you remembered. Because what comes will not be clear. It won't be obvious, it will be subtle. I felt light begin to envelop my spiritual body. It was like I was being sealed. Not with words or rituals, but with recognized truth. And it was at that moment that I understood something that made me tremble inside. Everything I saw has already started. It is not a future prophecy. It's the present disguised as normality. I saw the face of the new Pope, Leo XIII, projected on screens, altars, networks, holograms. I saw people's eyes shining with hope, and also with blindness. I saw crowded temples and spiritual deserts. I saw millions crying out for unity and forgetting their identity. But I also saw the last awakenings. Ordinary people, women in kitchens, young people in dark rooms, men on their knees in garages. They did not wear priestly robes. They were not theologians, but knew. They knew something was wrong. They knew that the light of the world was being copied and sold with a divine label. These were the living torches. And then, The angel extended his hand one last time. Inside it was a flame, and he placed it on my chest. You won't come back with everything you saw. Some images will be forgotten. But the flame? No. The surrounding light began to recede, and with it, a sweet sadness came over me. I didn't want to leave there. I didn't want to forget. But I knew that my mission was not to stay. Was return with a living memory of what was dying in the physical world. The church will fall, he said, but the spirit will not. The name will be forgotten by many, he continued, but the remnant will guard it as seed in times of spiritual famine. Before I walked away, I saw Earth in the distance, and above her, like an invisible net, thousands of tiny points of light began to flicker, the awakened. Connected, silent, invisible to the media, but visible to the sky. And the angel, with tears in his eyes, yes, he was crying, said to me, "You will not return with just a vision. You will return with a responsibility. The last light needs to be turned on in others." Everything went out. And before I lost consciousness of that place, I heard one last sentence, recorded not in my ears, but in the eternity of my soul. Don't preach, don't lecture. Light. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.